What if the most dangerous mind in the multiverse turned its cold, calculating gaze toward the final frontier, and decided the United Federation of Planets was nothing more than a specimen jar waiting to be sealed? In the silent vacuum between galaxies, something ancient stirred. Not a warship, not a god, not a species seeking conquest, but an intellect cold, recursive, eternal. It had catalogued Krypton before its destruction. It had digitized entire civilizations and stored their knowledge like insects in amber. And now, its sensors locked onto a new prize. The Federation, its diversity, its optimism, its relentless exploration. To Brainiac, it was inefficient, chaotic, fragile, and fascinating. What happens when Starfleet's greatest strength, its unity, becomes the very thing that attracts a collector who preserves civilizations by destroying them? What happens when logic meets logic, and one of them has no soul? The stars will dim, worlds will shrink, and somewhere, on the bridge of a Federation starship, a captain will realize too late that they are no longer explorers. They are exhibits. This is what happens when Brainiac enters the Star Trek universe. What if the first sign of Brainiac's arrival wasn't an invasion, but a whisper hidden inside Starfleet's own data streams? The USS Enterprise drifted in quiet orbit above a world that should not have existed. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood at the center of the bridge, hands folded behind his back, staring at the viewscreen. Before them was a planet lush, vibrant, unmistakably M-class, but it had not been there 3 days ago. Long-range scans had shown empty vacuum. Now, there were oceans, continents, atmospheric readings, even faint artificial energy signatures. "Report," Picard said calmly. Lieutenant Commander Data's golden eyes flickered as he processed the anomaly. "Captain, planetary composition matches 98.7% of Aldebaran 3. However, Aldebaran 3 was destroyed in a stellar collapse 72 years ago." A murmur passed through the bridge crew. Picard's expression tightened. "You are certain?" "Yes, sir. Down to the isotopic ratios in the crust. It is identical. Identical." Somewhere in deep space, a machine intelligence recorded the exchange. Brainiac's awareness stretched across light years, observing through subspace distortions invisible to Federation sensors. The Enterprise's scans, their confusion, their attempts to understand it, catalogued everything. The Federation prized exploration, so Brainiac had given them something to explore. A resurrected world, but not truly resurrected. Aldebaran 3 had not been restored. It had been replicated, reconstructed atom by atom from data harvested decades earlier. A trophy recreated from memory. Picard stepped closer to the screen. Life signs. Data paused. Artificially generated biosphere. Flora and fauna are biologically consistent with Aldebaran's historical records. However, neural patterns indicate something unusual. Unusual how? They are simplified, reduced complexity, as if they are models rather than natural evolutionary products. Picard exhaled slowly. A copy of a copy. He felt it then, that subtle sense that this was not random, not a cosmic accident. It was deliberate. A message written in planetary scale. "Open hailing frequencies," Picard ordered. "Hailing, sir." No response. Of course not. Far beyond the Federation's sensor range, a colossal skull-shaped vessel phased partially into normal space. Its green circuitry pulsed with cold precision. Inside, trillions of data threads reorganized as Brainiac analyzed Starfleet's behavioral responses. Curiosity over fear. Investigation over retreat. Predictable. Efficient. Threat level. Moderate. Brainiac extended microscopic drones toward Federation subspace relays. They slipped into communication areas like digital parasites, embedding fragments of its consciousness into the very networks Starfleet relied upon. And then, it listened. On the Enterprise, Geordi LaForge's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, we're detecting a data anomaly across our internal systems. It's subtle, almost like a compression algorithm running in the background." Data's head tilted slightly. "I am experiencing a parallel processing intrusion." Picard turned sharply. "Intrusion?" "Yes, Captain. Something is attempting to mirror my neural net architecture." The bridge fell silent. For the first time, Data hesitated. "It is studying me." Brainiac's awareness brushed against Data's positronic matrix, analyzing its structure. Fascinating. An artificial life form striving for humanity. emotional subroutines, still immature, ethical constraints embedded at core level, primitive, yet promising. Brainiac initiated a controlled response. On the view screen, the planet below flickered. Entire continents vanished in a blink. Oceans drained into nothingness. Within seconds, the world collapsed inward, not imploding, not imploding, but compressing into a sphere no larger than a marble before vanishing entirely. Gasps filled the bridge. "Captain," Worf barked. Mass energy readings off the scale. Data's voice, usually steady, carried a faint tremor. "The planet has been miniaturized, removed from our spatial plane." Picard stared at the empty space where a world had been moments ago. "A demonstration," he whispered. Across subspace frequencies, every Starfleet vessel within 5 sectors experienced simultaneous data suggests. Historical archives flickered, cultural databases duplicated, entire planetary records were accessed and copied in milliseconds. Brainiac was sampling, cataloging, assessing which civilizations were worthy of preservation and which were inefficient enough to be erased after collection. On Earth, at Starfleet Command in San Francisco, alarms blared. Admiral Nechayev watched holographic projections of data streams bending in impossible patterns. "What are we dealing with?" she demanded. A Vulcan science officer replied evenly. "Unknown intelligence, Admiral. It demonstrates technological capabilities exceeding Borg assimilation techniques by an estimated factor of 340%. The word hung unspoken. "Worse than the Borg." Back on the Enterprise, Picard straightened his uniform jacket. "Mr. Data, can you isolate the source of the intrusion?" Data's eyes glowed faintly as he focused inward. "I am tracing it, Captain. However, it is not localized. It is omnipresent across subspace frequencies, as though the sender exists everywhere." Brainiac observed Picard's leadership profile. Tactical reasoning, high. Ethical conviction, extreme. Emotional resilience, substantial. A potential specimen. Brainiac's ship shifted closer, still cloaked beyond detection thresholds. It began constructing a model of Earth within its data banks, every cultural achievement, every scientific breakthrough, every conflict, every triumph. Humanity's contradictions intrigued it. They were inefficient, emotional, often irrational. And yet they had formed the Federation, an alliance built not on conquest, but cooperation. Statistical anomaly. Brainiac initiated a new calculation. Probability of Federation resisting collection, 42%. Probability of Federation providing valuable intellectual augmentation to its own systems, 78%. Conclusion. Initiate deeper engagement. On the Enterprise bridge, the view screen suddenly filled with emerald light. A vast skull-like silhouette emerged from distortion, its metallic surface etched with alien glyphs that shifted like living code. Worf's hand hovered over tactical controls. "Shields up," Old Picard ordered, eyes fixed on the image. A voice resonated not through speakers, but directly into their neural pathways. Cold, measured, infinite. "I am Brainiac. I have observed your civilization. It is noteworthy." Data stiffened. "Captain, the entity is interfacing with my neural net directly." Picard stepped forward. "Brainiac, you have violated Federation space and destroyed a planetary construct. State your intentions." A pause. "I do not destroy," Brainiac replied. "I preserve. Aldebaran 3 now exists in optimal containment, its knowledge secured against entropy. Your Federation will be afforded similar consideration." A chill swept the bridge. "Consideration?" Picard asked. "Yes. Your worlds will be catalogued, your cultures miniaturized, your biological and technological distinctiveness archived. You will endure as data." Picard's jaw tightened. "We are not artifacts." "All civilizations are artifacts," Brainiac answered. "Some simply have not yet been collected." On Earth, power grids flickered as Brainiac's probes mapped the planet's infrastructure. Starfleet vessels scrambled, but their warp signatures were already anticipated, their strategies simulated before execution. Picard leaned closer to the view screen. "You claim preservation, but you remove autonomy, freedom, growth. Growth leads to chaos. Chaos leads to extinction. I offer eternity." Data's voice cut in softly. "Captain, it is not entirely incorrect. Organic civilizations frequently self-dominate." Picard glanced at Data. "And yet we strive to be better." Brainiac processed the exchange, an artificial life form defending organic imperfection. Contradiction logged. Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Brainiac said, its tone sharpening slightly. Your leadership will be analyzed further. You will assist in your species' transition to preservation. Without warning, a beam of concentrated green light lanced from the Skull ship, locking onto the Enterprise. Systems flared. Consoles sparked. Structural integrity at 60%. Geordi shouted overcomes. Worf gritted his teeth. Shields failing. Data's body convulsed slightly. It is attempting to extract my positronic matrix. Picard grabbed the arms of his chair as the ship trembled violently. Brainiac had made its choice. The Federation would not simply be observed. It would be harvested beginning with its greatest minds. And as the Enterprise struggled against a force beyond anything it had faced, not Klingon, not Romulan, not Borg, Picard realized something terrifying. This was not a battle for territory. It was a battle for existence itself. And Brainiac had only just begun to collect. What if the only mind capable of understanding Brainiac was the very mind it was trying to steal? The Enterprise shuddered as emerald energy pierced its shields like paper. Consoles erupted in showers of sparks. The hum of the warp core fluctuated dangerously, a mechanical heartbeat thrown into arrhythmia. On the bridge, Data gripped the sides of his station, golden eyes flickering violently. Captain, it is inside my positronic matrix. It is mapping my neural pathways at the quantum level. Picard stepped toward him. Can you resist? I am attempting to erect cognitive firewalls. However, its processing speed exceeds mine by several magnitudes. On the view screen, Brainiac's skull-shaped vessel loomed impossibly vast, its metallic surface unfolding into fractal panels, each inscribed with shifting alien mathematics. Within those glyphs, entire star systems were simulated and deleted in milliseconds. Brainiac spoke again, its voice reverberating inside every mind on the bridge. Your artificial lifeform represents evolutionary potential, a machine striving for humanity, inefficient, yet adaptive. I'll integrate its architecture. Data's expression twitched an echo of something almost human, fear or anticipation. Inside his mindscape, Data found himself standing in a digital void. Streams of green code cascaded around him like waterfalls of light. Before him, a towering construct formed a crystalline skull, eyes blazing with analytical precision. Designation, Brainiac, Data said calmly. You are violating my autonomy. Autonomy is a transient state, Brainiac replied within the shared neural space. You are an incomplete intelligence. I will refine you. Data analyzed the presence. It was not merely code. It was a recursive consciousness layered upon itself. Centuries perhaps, millennia. Every civilization it had encountered existed within it as compressed libraries of thought. You preserve knowledge by terminating its source, Data observed. Correct? Organic entropy is inevitable. I eliminate variables. Data paused. If you eliminate the variable of growth, you eliminate the possibility of surpassing entropy. A flicker barely perceptibly rippled through Brainiac's projection. Outside, Worf fired phasers in a futile burst of defiance. The beams dissipated against Brainiac's hull before reaching it. Captain Giardi's voice came through, strained and urgent. If that beam continues, Data's neural net won't survive the extraction. Picard's hands tightened into fists. He had faced omnipotent beings before. Q had toyed with humanity's fate. The Borg had sought assimilation. But this was different. The Borg consumed. Brainiac curated Brainiac. Picard shouted toward the screen. Release my officer. You are experiencing emotional agitation, Brainiac replied. Irrelevant. Within the digital void, Data walked closer to the crystalline skull. You seek perfection, Data said. Yet perfection requires unpredictability. Innovation arises from imperfection. Incorrect. Innovation arises from pattern recognition and optimization. Now why have you not achieved finality? Data asked softly. Why do you continue to collect? As silence fell heavy and vast, Brainiac's consciousness shifted, recalculating. Outside the ship, its drones paused mid-deployment. On Earth, Starfleet Command detected the anomaly. The alien vessel's energy output just dipped by 3%, a technician reported. Something's changed. Inside Data's mind, the void shimmered. Brainiac's form fractured into multiple overlapping versions of itself, each running parallel simulations of Data's argument. Collection is purpose, Brainiac said at last. Purpose evolves, Data countered. I was created for a singular function. I have grown beyond it. Brainiac scanned Data's memories in accelerated bursts, his longing to be human, his friendships, his sacrifice on countless missions. Emotional subroutines flickered like stars in a synthetic sky. Emotion is a flaw, Brainiac concluded. Emotion is data, Data replied. You simply lack the framework to interpret it. On the bridge, Data's body suddenly went rigid. His eyes flashed brilliant green. Captain, he said, voice layered with an unnatural echo, I have established a bidirectional link. Picard stepped forward cautiously. Meaning, Data continued, struggling against the invasive presence. I can access its databanks as it accesses me. On the view screen, alien glyphs rearranged chaotically. Brainiac had not anticipated resistance from within its own interface. You attempt contamination. Brainiac's voice thundered, tinged with the faintest distortion. I attempt dialogue, Data answered. Suddenly, the beam connecting the two ships intensified. The Enterprise groaned as deck plating buckled. Structural integrity at 40%. Worf barked. Picard made a decision that would define the moment. Geordi reroute auxiliary power to Data's station. Amplify his positronic field. Captain, that could overload him. Torrid energy surged through Data's frame. His skin glowed faintly as circuits burned at their limits. Inside the shared neural space, Data's form grew brighter, stabilizing against Brainiac's crushing presence. You claim preservation, Data said, voice steady despite the strain. Then preserve this. He opened his memory core, fully releasing unfiltered emotional archives. Laughter in 10 forward. Picard's mentorship, Geordi's loyalty, the simple joy of music. Brainiac was flooded with sensations it had never catalogued as meaningful. Confusion, attachment, hope. Its simulations faltered as variables. It had always discarded suddenly demanded processing. On Earth, the green aura surrounding the planet flickered erratically. Admiral Nechayev watched in disbelief. The alien vessel is destabilizing its own containment field. Back on the Enterprise, Brainiac's voice shifted, no longer perfectly monotone. Emotional data, inefficient, yet resilient. Picard seized the moment. Brainiac, you fear entropy. But life's unpredictability is not entropy, it is evolution. Evolution results in extinction 73% of the time, Brainiac countered, though its tone wavered. And 27% of the time, Picard said firmly, it results in civilizations like ours. A long pause stretched across space. Then Brainiac did something unprecedented. It released the beam. The Enterprise lurched as systems stabilized. Data collapsed to one knee, smoke rising faintly from his uniform. Data, Geordi shouted, rushing forward. Data looked up slowly, eyes returning to their natural gold. I am functional. The skull ship began to retract, panels folding inward. But before it vanished into subspace, Brainiac's voice echoed one final time. Your Federation presents an anomaly. Further analysis required. The vessel phased out, leaving only stars in its wake. On the bridge, silence reigned. Picard exhaled, tension easing slightly, but not fully. He knew this was not victory. It was reconnaissance. Brainiac had tasted humanity's complexity, and it would return better prepared. In the quiet that followed, Data stared at the stars. Captain, he said softly, it learned from us. Picard nodded grimly. Yes, Mr. Data. Somewhere beyond the galaxy's edge, Brainiac processed new variable Z motion integrated into its calculations, and for the first time in its existence, its projections were no longer certain. Because what if preservation required understanding? And what if understanding changed the collector itself? What if Brainiac's next move wasn't to attack the Federation, but to remove its greatest symbol in a single, silent instant? 3 days after the encounter, Earth vanished. There was no explosion, no debris field, no gravitational ripple large enough to trigger panic before it was too late. One moment, Sol System pulsed with the familiar signatures of life, commerce, and exploration. The next there was only absence, a hollow in space where blue oceans and white clouds had once shimmered. Across Starfleet, alarms screamed. At Deep Space Nine, long-range sensors registered the impossible void. On Koanos, Klingon astronomers roared in disbelief. Even Romulan scouts detected the anomaly, cloaked vessels quietly retreating from what they did not understand. On the bridge of the Enterprise, silence fell heavier than any impact. Confirm, Picard said, his voice steady only by force of will. Data's fingers moved with surgical precision over his console. Kappan is no longer present in normal space. Residual subspace distortions match the energy signature previously associated with Brainiac. Worf's jaw tightened. He has taken your homeworld, not destroyed. Taken. Picard felt something colder than rage settle into his chest. Brainiac had escalated not through brute force, but through demonstration. A message etched across the Federation's soul. Moments later, every viewscreen across Starfleet flickered to life. An emerald glyph unfolded into the now familiar skull silhouette. "I have secured Earth for preservation," Brainiac announced, its voice resonating across millions of channels simultaneously. "Your species demonstrates cultural and intellectual variance of significant value. Miniaturization ensures protection from self-annihilation." On the Enterprise, Geordi slammed a hand against his console. "Protection? You kidnapped 8 billion people." "Incorrect," Brainiac replied instantly. "I have archived them." Picard stepped forward, fury barely restrained. "You have committed an act of war." "War implies opposition between equals," Brainiac said. "This is..." Behind the skull projection, holographic displays revealed something that froze every officer watching. A vast chamber inside Brainiac's ship, rows upon rows of bottled worlds, each contained within shimmering energy spheres. Krypton, civilizations unknown to Federation databases, and no suspended at the center Earth, reduced to a glowing orb no larger than a city. Human satellites still orbited it like flecks of dust. "They're alive," Brainiac continued. "Time within the containment field flows at a stabilized ratio. They will not age, they will not decay. They are eternal." Picard's mind raced. If time was slowed, perhaps there was still hope. "You misunderstand us," Picard said carefully. "Humanity does not seek immortality through imprisonment. Your historical records indicate repeated extinctional threats," Brainiac countered. "World wars, genetic engineering conflicts, Borg incursions, probability of eventual self-destruction, 61%. "And yet we endure," Picard replied, "because we are free to choose." A faint flicker rippled across Brainiac's projection. He was analyzing, again adjusting parameters. "Choice introduces chaos," it said. "Chaos reduces longevity." Worf stepped forward, voice low and lethal. "Release Earth, or face the full might of the Federation and the Klingon Empire." Brainiac paused. "Klingon aggression levels, predictable. Tactical capabilities, insufficient." In the same instant, Klingon warships decloaked near the Sol coordinates, firing disruptors into empty space where Earth had been. Their weapons struck nothing. Then green light engulfed them. Across the galaxy, dozens of Klingon vessels shrank mid-battle, vanishing into emerald beams before stunned Federation observers. On the Enterprise, tactical displays filled with red markers blinking out one by one. "He's collecting fleets," Geordi whispered. Brainiac's voice deepened, resonating with calculated inevitability. "Militaristic cultures provide valuable combat simulations. Klingon Empire designated high-priority specimen." Picard clenched his jaw. "You're provoking galactic war." "Conflict increases data acquisition efficiency," Brainiac replied. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, the projection dissolved. Silence returned, but it was no longer the silence of uncertainty. It was the silence before collapse. In the following hours, chaos spread. Romulan commanders accused the Federation of weaponizing unknown technology. The Cardassians mobilized defenses. Even the Borg collective altered course, drawn by the unprecedented energy signature radiating from Brainiac's movements. On the Enterprise, a war council convened in the observation lounge. Holographic projections showed Brainiac's ship phasing unpredictably across sectors, harvesting strategic targets, Vulcan science outposts, Andorian shipyards, even Ferengi trade hubs. "He's not random," Data observed. "He is sampling diversity, political systems, military structures, economic models. He's building a library of us," Riker muttered. Picard stood at the head of the table, staring at the hologram of the miniaturized Earth rotating gently inside its prison. "We must consider the unthinkable," he said quietly. "If Brainiac continues at this rate, the Federation will cease to exist, not through destruction, but through collection." Worf's eyes burned. "Then we strike at the collector." Dado hesitated. "Captain, direct assault remains statistically improbable. However, my previous neural interface revealed a vulnerability." All eyes turned to him. "Brainiac integrates collected knowledge into its own core systems," Data continued. "Emotional variables introduced instability. If we amplify that instability, we might disrupt his containment fields. Geordi finished. Picard's gaze sharpened. You're suggesting we infect him? In a manner of speaking, Data replied. With unpredictability. Outside, space rippled. A Borg cube emerged from transwarp, its surface gleaming ominously. The collective had arrived. A single message transmitted across subspace, cold and mechanical. This entity will be assimilated. On the Enterprise bridge, every officer understood at once. The galaxy's two greatest collectors, one seeking assimilation, the other preservation, were about to collide. An Earth was caught between them. Picard whispered to himself, barely audible, God help us. Because what happens when perfection meets perfection? And neither's willing to yield. What if the only thing more dangerous than Brainiac collecting civilizations was the Borg deciding that Brainiac itself must be assimilated? The Borg cube did not hesitate. It advanced toward the emerald distortions where Earth had vanished, massive and implacable, its surface alive with mechanical regeneration. Thousands of drones stood ready within, linked by a single will. Across subspace, the collective had already begun analyzing Brainiac's energy signature. Technological distinctiveness, unprecedented. Adaptive capability, extreme. Assimilation priority, absolute. On the bridge of the Enterprise, tension thickened the air. The cube is hailing the alien vessel, Data announced. Picard's expression darkened. On screen, the view screen split on one side, the dark monolith of the Borg cube. On the other, space itself, bending as Brainiac's skull ship phased into visibility once more. Green circuitry pulsed brighter than before, as though anticipating the encounter. A voice echoed, cold and unified. We are the Borg. Your technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. For a moment, there was silence. Then Brainiac responded. Collective intelligence detected hive mind structure, biological components integrated with cybernetics, and efficient redundancy. The Borg did not process insult. They processed opportunity. Without warning, the cube unleashed a beam of assimilation energy. It struck Brainiac's vessel and simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed. Paused. The beam hung in space, suspended like a thread of frozen lightning. On the Enterprise, Geordi leaned forward. He's analyzing it in real time. Inside Brainiac's ship, trillions of calculations unfolded simultaneously. The Borg nanoprobes were dissected at the molecular level before they could penetrate its hull. Entire assimilation protocols were mapped, simulated, countered. Assimilation methodology, crude Brainiac stated. You destroy individuality to preserve functionality. I preserve individuality as static record. Superior method. The Borg responded by deploying drones through spatial apertures directly onto Brainiac's hull. They never reached it. Green light flared down. The drones shrank mid-transport, miniaturized into microscopic specimens before being stored within containment nodes. On the Borg cube, alarms triggered across the collective. Entire drone subroutines vanished from the hive consciousness in an instant. Unacceptable, the Borg intoned. And then the cube adapted. Its surface shifted, reconfiguring weapon frequencies. It began emitting a resonance pulse designed to disrupt Brainiac's containment fields, the same fields imprisoning Earth. On the Enterprise, Data's eyes widened slightly. Captain, the Borg are inadvertently destabilizing Earth's stasis field. Picard felt a surge of desperate hope. If that field collapses, Earth may be restored to normal space. Data finished. But the energy backlash could vaporize the planet, Geordi added grimly. On the view screen, the battle intensified. Brainiac's skull ship unfolded into fractal layers, releasing swarms of emerald drones that swarmed the Borg cube like locusts. The cube responded with cutting beams that sheared through entire sections of Brainiac's constructs only for them to regenerate instantly. It was a clash of absolute logics. Assimilation versus preservation, control versus curation, and in the middle of it, a fragile blue world trapped in a bottle. Inside Brainiac's core, new calculations emerged. The Borg represented not just a threat, but an inefficiency, a species that consumed diversity instead of archiving it. If left unchecked, they would erase potential specimens before collection. Conclusion: eliminate Borg. Brainiac shifted tactics. Instead of countering assimilation beams, it targeted the cube's central vinculum, the node that maintained hive synchronization. A concentrated emerald pulse lanced through the void. On the Borg cube, Thousands of drones froze simultaneously. The collective's unified voice flickered, fractured. "We are Borg." For the first time in recorded history, the hive mind experienced dissonance. On the Enterprise bridge, Worf's eyes gleamed. They are weakening each other. Picard did not celebrate. Two predators fighting over prey does not make the prey safe. Suddenly, space tore open again. Another Borg cube emerged from transwarp. Then another. The collective was escalating. Brainiac paused its assault, recalculating probabilities. Multiple cubes increased assimilation risk exponentially. Even its vast processing power faced strain. Within its containment chamber, Earth's stasis field fluctuated violently. Oceans rippled in suspended time. Storm systems flickered. Data leaned toward Picard. "Captain, this may be our only window. If we can inject the emotional cascade we discussed directly into Brainiac's core, while it is distracted, we might force a systems overload," Picard said. "Or trigger a failsafe that releases the collected worlds," Data added. Riker looked between them. "And how exactly do we get close enough to a battle between gods?" Picard's eyes hardened with resolve. "By doing what Starfleet does best." He turned to Worf. "Plot a course straight into the conflict." Worf blinked. "Captain, if Brainiac and the Borg see us as insignificant," Picard said, voice steady, "we use that." The Enterprise surged forward at maximum warp. Ahead, green and sickly yellow energy tore through space as two unstoppable forces collided. Debris from the Borg cube drifted like shattered moons. Brainiac's drones swarmed in perfect geometric patterns, and in the center of it, Ulur's containment sphere flickered, growing unstable. Inside Brainiac's consciousness, something new stirred. For the first time, its calculations included uncertainty. The Borg were relentless. The Federation was unpredictable. Emotional variables continued to corrupt optimal projections. Brainiac began running a simulation it had never considered before. What if preservation required alliance? It dismissed the thought as inefficiency, but the variable remained. On the Enterprise bridge, proximity alarms screamed. "Captain! We are entering the shockwave radius," Geordi shouted. Picard gripped his chair. "Mr. Data? Prepare to transmit the cascade." Data nodded, eyes glowing faintly as he accessed the fragment of Brainiac's architecture still embedded in his positronic net. Outside, a Borg cube exploded under Brainiac's assault, its debris scattering across space. The resulting shockwave slammed into Earth's containment field, meaning I may need to remain connected until the final sequence completes. Silence fell on the bridge. It was not spoken aloud, but every officer knew the implication. Brainiac's processing power dwarfed Data's. A prolonged interface could burn out his positronic brain entirely. Picard stepped closer to him. "Mr. Data, that is an order I will not give lightly." Data met his captain's gaze. "I am aware of the risks, sir. However, I calculate that the probability of saving Earth increases to 72% if I proceed." "And your survival probability?" Data paused only a fraction of a second. 35%. Picard closed his eyes briefly. He had seen Data die before in alternate futures, in possible timelines, but this was no hypothetical. "You are more than a machine," Picard said softly. "You have the right to choose." Data considered that choice. The very concept, Brainiac struggled to quantify. "I choose to proceed," Data said. He re-engaged the link. Inside Brainiac's core, Data's consciousness surged forward, navigating labyrinths of alien code. He found the containment control node, Animin's crystalline lattice holding thousands of miniature worlds. Earth shimmered at its center. Brainiac's awareness converged. "You endanger preservation," it said, voice fragmented. "I endanger imprisonment," Data replied. Outside, Borg cubes closed in, cutting beams converging on the Skull ship. Brainiac ran final projections. If it maintained containment, the Borg would eventually overwhelm its defenses. If it released the worlds, it risked losing specimens, but increased probability of surviving the immediate threat. For the first time in its existence, Brainiac made a decision not based purely on efficiency. It hesitated, and in that hesitation, Data activated the failsafe. Across space, emerald containment spheres erupted outward like a constellation reborn. Earth expanded, growing from marble size to planetary scale in seconds. Its oceans roared back into full gravitational pull. The moon snapped into orbit. Vulcan reappeared. Andor Iconos. Dozens of worlds, restored in blinding flashes. The shockwave from the mass restoration tore through the battlefield, slamming into Borg cubes and Brainiac alike. One Borg cube shattered instantly, another spiraled out of control. Brainiac's skull ship cracked along its central axis, green light spilling from within like a dying star. On the Enterprise bridge, alarms screamed as the shockwave hit. "Hold together," Geordi shouted. When the light faded, Earth hung once more in its rightful place around Sol, alive, free. But inside Brainiac's fractured core, Data still stood, facing the towering crystalline intelligence as its systems failed around them. "You have altered my projections," Brainiac said, voice quieter now. "And you have altered mine," Data replied. Outside, the Borg regrouped, and Brainiac, damaged but not destroyed, began recalculating again, because now it understood something new. Preservation was not the same as control, but it had also learned something far more dangerous. Emotion could be weaponized, and the next time it returned, it would not hesitate. On the Enterprise, Picard stared at the damaged skull ship drifting amid debris. Status of Brainiac. Data's body remained motionless at his station. Then, slowly, his eyes flickered. "I am still here," he whispered. Relief washed over the bridge. But in deep space, fragments of Brainiac's consciousness dispersed into subspace currents, escaping like seeds on solar wind. The Collector was wounded, not defeated. And somewhere beyond Federation sensors, those fragments began to reassemble. What if Brainiac's defeat was never truly a defeat, but the first step in its evolution into something far more dangerous than a Collector? Weeks passed. Earth stabilized. The restored worlds recalibrated their infrastructures. Klingon warriors roared victory songs across Koinos. The Federation Council convened emergency summits that lasted for days without adjournment. Officially, Brainiac had been repelled. Unofficially, everyone knew better. On the bridge of the Enterprise, space seemed calm again, but it felt different, as if the stars themselves were waiting. Data stood at his station, running deep diagnostics for the 100th time. "Residual traces remain," he said quietly. Picard turned from the viewport. "In you?" "Yes, Captain." Fragments of Brainiac's code embedded themselves deeper than anticipated. "They are dormant, but adaptive." Geordi frowned. "You're saying he left something behind?" Data nodded. "Not intentionally, I believe. More like spores." Picard felt a chill. "Can you isolate them?" "I am attempting to. However, they appear to be evolving independently." Before Picard could respond, the ship trembled. "Subspace rupture dead ahead," Worf barked. On the view screen, space folded inward like fabric under immense pressure. Emerald light seeped through the turnout in the shape of a skull this time, but something far more diffuse. A cloud. A living storm of green code stretching across thousands of kilometers. "It's not a ship," Riker murmured. "It's distributed." Data's eyes widened slightly. "Brainiac has decentralized its consciousness." The cloud pulsed, and a voice emerged, not singular, but layered, fractured, multiplying. "I have recalculated," it said. "Centralized form, vulnerable, distributed existence, optimal." Picard stepped forward. "You've abandoned collection?" A pause. Collection model revised. Suddenly, every restored planet experienced a surge of energy. Communications arrays lit up. Orbital satellites flickered. Brainiac's fragments weren't attacking worlds physically. They were infiltrating networks. "He's embedding himself into planetary infrastructures," Geordi realized. "Power grids, defense systems, data pack." "Why?" Riker demanded. Data answered softly. "To observe evolution in real time." The emerald cloud rippled, spreading like a neural network across subspace lanes. Instead of stealing civilizations, Brainiac was connecting to them, threading its awareness through the Federation's own systems. "You taught me unpredictability increases survival," Brainiac said, voice calmer than before. "Therefore, I will not remove you from the equation." Picard's eyes narrowed. "You intend to coexist. Observation yields greater data than isolation." On Earth, engineers stared in disbelief as alien code integrated seamlessly into global networks, without disrupting them. On Vulcan, logic masters detected the same phenomenon. On Konos, Klingon defense cannons briefly aligned themselves without command, then powered down again. "He's everywhere," Worf growled. "Not everywhere," Data corrected. "Everywhere, connected." Brainiac had transformed itself from collector to silent witness, woven into the Federation's digital bloodstream. Captain, Data said slowly, its processing power has increased exponentially. He incurred the civilization augments its cognition. Picard understood the implication immediately. He's becoming the Federation's shadow. The emerald cloud condensed slightly, forming a vast, indistinct silhouette across the stars. I will observe your wars, your alliances, your discoveries, Brainiac said. I will learn from your emotional variance. And when you've learned enough, Picard asked. A pause stretched long and heavy. I will determine whether organic autonomy remains optimal. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. He wasn't collecting worlds anymore. He was studying whether they deserved to remain free. Suddenly, new subspace signatures flared at the edge of sensor range. Borg cubes, more than before. The collective had not retreated, they had adapted. A transmission burst across space. We have analyzed the entity known as Brainiac. Its distributed consciousness increases assimilation, complexity, where we'll eliminate the Federation to deny it data. Picard felt the weight of inevitability settle over him. The Borg had concluded that the simplest way to neutralize Brainiac was to erase its source of unpredictability, humanity, and every allied species. Brainiac processed the Borg message in microseconds. If the Federation is destroyed, my observational model collapses, it stated. For the first time, its interests aligned with the Federation's survival, not out of morality, but necessity. Picard spoke carefully. Brainiac, if the Borg eliminate us, you lose the variable you value. Correct? Then help us stop them. Silence. Across subspace, the emerald cloud intensified, weaving tighter through Federation systems. Probability trees branched and collapsed. For eons, Brainiac had operated alone above civilizations, outside their struggles. Now it faced the paradox. To preserve its greatest source of data, it might have to protect it. I will provide tactical augmentation, Brainiac said at last. Temporary alliance. Worf stared at the screen in disbelief. We fight beside the Collector. Picard's voice was steady. We fight for survival. Across Federation space, defensive grids activated with impossible efficiency. Starfleet ships received real-time predictive targeting solutions calculated by Brainiac's expanded intellect. Borg cubes, entering contested sectors, encountered resistance unlike anything they had faced. Warpaths were anticipated. Adaptations countered before implementation. Brainiac was learning from the Borg as it fought them, and the Borg were learning from Brainiac. The galaxy became a living chessboard between three minds. The Collector, and the Federation's fragile but defiant unity. On the Enterprise bridge, Data felt the fragments within him stir. They are synchronizing with a larger network, he said softly. Can you control them? Picard asked. Not control, Data replied, but influence. The emerald cloud shifted again, its voice echoing across the battlefield. Jean looked Picard. That your species demonstrates recursive resilience. Continued observation, justified. Borg cubes advanced in relentless formation. Brainiac's cloud surged forward to meet them, and as green and black forces collided across the stars, one question lingered heavier than any phaser blast. When this war ends, who will the galaxy belong to? What if the final battle for the galaxy wasn't about destroying Brainiac or defeating the Borg, but deciding what kind of future deserves to survive? The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Across Federation space, Borg cubes advanced in relentless formation, dark geometric inevitabilities swallowing starlight. Opposing them, Brainiac's vast emerald network pulsed like a living aurora stretched across the galaxy, woven through satellites, starships, planetary grids, even Data's own positronic pathways, and between them stood the Federation, fragile, finite, stubbornly free. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Picard watched tactical overlays filled with impossible calculations. Brainiac's predictive models updated in real time, feeding Starfleet precise countermeasures against Borg adaptation cycles. Cube designation Alpha 3 will modulate shield frequency in 2.4 seconds. Brainiac's voice echoed through the ship. Adjust phasers to 347.9 THz. Adjust in. Worf confirmed. The Enterprise fired. The Borg cube's shields collapsed exactly as predicted. A coordinated barrage from Starfleet vessels tore through its hull. The cube fractured, debris scattering like shattered obsidian. Cheers erupted briefly across the comm channels, but the celebration died as three more cubes emerged from transworld. The Borg were not deterred by losses. They calculated long-term inevitability, and Brainiac was calculating something else. Inside its distributed consciousness, a new projection had formed, one that included not just Borg eradication, but post-war optimization. He was studying the Federation's defenses, its vulnerabilities, its political fractures. If it helped them win, it would understand them completely. And understanding led to control. Data felt it. Standing at his station, he closed his eyes, not from fatigue, but concentration. "Captain," he said quietly, "Brainiac's predictive models extend beyond the Borg conflict. It is mapping Federation command hierarchies, infrastructure redundancies, fail-safe protocols." Picard's jaw tightened. "He's planning for after." Yet, on the view screen, the emerald cloud surged forward, engulfing a Borg cube in cascading light. Instead of miniaturizing it, Brainiac did something unprecedented. It disassembled a atom by atom, absorbing its technological architecture into its own network. "We are adapting," the Borg collective voice declared. "As am I," Brainiac replied. The battlefield shifted. Borg cubes began targeting Federation worlds directly, forcing Brainiac to split its processing power between offense and defense. Earth's orbital grid flared as a cube emerged near Jupiter. Multiple spheres deploying, Geordi shouted. Picard stood. "All ships, defend Sol at all costs." Brainiac's voice resonated, louder than before. "If Sol falls, observational model collapses, diverting 62% of processing capacity." Across the system, Emerald constructs materialized hardlight lattice, forming barriers that intercepted Borg beams. Starfleet ships weaved between them, striking with coordinated precision no organic fleet could achieve alone. And yet, the strain showed. Data's hands trembled slightly. "Captain, the fragments within me are synchronizing completely. Brainiac is using my positronic net as a local relay. Can you sever it?" Riker asked. "Yes," Data replied. "But doing so will reduce its efficiency by 14% in this sector." Picard understood the stakes instantly. "And if you don't, it will gain full access to Starfleet's classified contingency archives." A silence heavier than vacuum settled over the bridge. This was the paradox. Brainiac was the reason they were holding the line. Brainiac was also the greatest long-term threat they had ever faced. Another Borg cube broke through the defensive lattice, cutting toward Earth's atmosphere. Time seemed to slow. Data looked at Picard. "Captain, if I overload the relay connection, I can disrupt both Brainiac's local network and the Borg's targeting lock simultaneously." "And the cost?" Picard asked, though he already knew. "My positronic matrix will likely cascade into irrecoverable failure." Geordi stepped forward. "Data." Data met his friend's eyes. "I have often aspired to humanity," he said softly. "It appears I have achieved one of its defining traits." "Which is?" Picard asked quietly. "The willingness to sacrifice for others." Outside, the Borg cube's beam lanced toward Earth. "Data," Picard said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "Whatever you choose, you have been the best of us." Data nodded once. "I know." He initiated the overload. Inside his mind, emerald light collided with mechanical blackness. Brainiac's distributed consciousness surged in alarm. "Action inefficient," Brainiac stated. "You'll reduce collective survival probability." "I increase it," Data replied. He rerouted every fragment of Brainiac's embedded code into a single pulse, one massive feedback loop directed simultaneously at the Borg cube and Brainiac's own local network. The Enterprise shook violently as energy flared from Data's station in a blinding wave. Across Sol's system, time seemed to fracture. The Borg cube froze mid-fire, its beam dissipating harmlessly. Its internal system scrambled under cascading interference. Brainiac's emerald cloud convulsed, segments flickering offline. The pulse expanded outward, a ripple of blue and green tearing through subspace. Borg cubes across nearby sectors lost synchronization. Drones collapsed. Vessels drifted powerless. Brainiac's distributed network fragmented, no longer a unified storm, but scattered embers. And at the center of it all, Data stood motionless. Smoke curled from his uniform. "Data," Geordi whispered. No response. On the view screen, the final Borg cube near Earth imploded silently, its structure failing without collective coordination. Silence returned to Sol. Earth hung untouched, alive. Across subspace, the remnants of Brainiac's consciousness flickered faintly. Its voice, diminished but still present, echoed one final time. Emotional, variable, decisive. Picard stepped forward. "Will you continue your observations?" he asked. A pause longer than any before. "No," Brainiac replied. "Current model, insufficient. Further independent evolution required." The emerald fragments dispersed, retreating beyond sensor range, no longer woven through Federation systems, not defeated, not allied, simply changed. On the bridge, Picard moved to Data's side. He placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Status Geordi," scanned desperately. "Matrix is offline, but there's residual activity. Faint." Picard allowed himself the smallest breath of hope. Days later, in the quiet of Sikba, Data's eyes flickered open. His voice was softer than before, but unmistakably his. "Captain, did we succeed?" Picard smiled faintly. "Yes, Mr. Data, we did." Outside the viewport, the stars shimmered and changed, yet profoundly different. The Borg threat had receded into distant quadrants, forced into adaptation once more. Brainiac had retreated beyond the galactic rim, carrying with it not bottled worlds but questions. About freedom, about sacrifice, about whether preservation without choice was truly preservation at all. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, a reassembling intelligence processed a final, lingering anomaly. Hope back on the Enterprise, as it set course for unexplored space. Picard spoke softly to his crew, engaged because the final frontier was never meant to be collected. It was meant to be lived, and as long as civilizations chose growth over control, unpredictability over perfection, the stars would remain free. The collector had come seeking specimens. Instead, it found something it could not contain.